All right, everybody. Welcome anyone who's going to be here with us live, but also everyone who catches the recording. I see you sneaky people. We are going to be talking through today. I think this is one of the newest marketing tactics. I'm not sure if that's the right way to poise it. That's how I've kind of seen it. Back in the day, right, we had SEO, we have Google ads, Facebook ads, ad platforms, programmatic ads, programmatic SEO, everything in between. And then I'd say in the last couple of years, we've had this new kind of technology slash tactic slash initiative, I guess, of kind of like visitor identification, right? Where, and I'll broadly kind of give a quick intro is how I see it. And we've got John here who's going to really dive into this deeper. Is if you're running ads, if you're doing things, these are people that are coming to your site. You don't really get a second chance to talk to them because they leave. So you might have the classic remarketing, which is debatable on how efficient that is or isn't working of adding people to your audiences. And then we now have this idea around let's de-anonymize them in some capacity, whether that's a LinkedIn profile, an email address, a phone number, a location, a first name, a last, whatever that combination of information is. So today we're going to talk through kind of what they are, like how you kind of look at them, what you should be using them for, maybe what you shouldn't be using them for. And we're just gonna have a general like conversation here about maybe adding this into a marketing stack, what marketers should know from a more technical side of things. And we're just kind of going to go from there. So John, I'll let you do your own intro here. And we're going to kind of go from there. So the mic is yours.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, JJ. Yeah, I'm super excited to talk about this topic. Like when I first heard about these tools, I got really fascinated by them. And I kind of assumed that they were delivering on their promise. And I tried to figure out what they were doing for a long time. And in my work, I used to work at Elevar and I worked on identity and signal information there. And now in my new work at a company called Customers AI, we do this specifically. We work on signal and identity. And like, it's hard to overstate how core this functionality could be to the marketing stack, right? Like if you take it from one end of the spectrum and say that you could identify everyone all the time, well, you would have this incredibly clear picture of what marketing works and what doesn't. And also you'd have this amazing ability to remarket to people. So like somebody, you pay for an ad, maybe it's an expensive ad, they land on the site, they look really interested, but they never identify themselves to you. But hey, you have their email address, you know they're super interested. So why not do something like send them an email, send them a text if you want to take that risk, show them a remarketing ad. Like it's pretty obvious that this technology could be incredibly helpful if it worked. So that's kind of like I hope that sort of sets the stage. What I found in my investigation over the last couple of years about these tools is not to take away from like the core promise. If the tools delivered on what they're promising, there's incredible power here. It's just, it doesn't seem like that's actually the case. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think just to like take even a step further back is what is the core like concept from like a technical side of things, I guess, from a maybe not super technical of like, hey, this is how this works, or like ping this thing and do this other thing to try and get this idea, but like from a user standpoint, if I sign up for these, like there's a million of them out there and everyone and their mom seems to be launching them in like the span of a week, which makes everything more questionable, right? If you can stand a product up in a week. Hey, I got this idea and now we're at 3 million MRR divided by the square root of who knows what growth rate. What is happening, I guess, behind the scenes, generally speaking, to like make this happen so that we at least have an idea of like, here's a person comes to the website. How is this even possible at any level of sophistication? And then what should someone like be looking at to kind of go from there?
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of data brokers out there who sell information on people, and you could basically think of them as tables. I mean, I'll try to keep this description as generic as possible. It's going to be right in some cases and wrong in other cases, but generally let's say that you could buy a table with hashed email addresses or potentially even not hashed email addresses. And then beside those email addresses in that table, maybe there's stuff like IP address of that person, or potentially cookies that are in their browser, or even potentially fingerprint information like their like the user agent, or how fast they were able to draw something on a canvas, or like it's think about an email address beside almost an unlimited combination of other information. So you can buy this data, right? You can buy it from a whole bunch of different sources. A lot of it comes from DSPs, like advertising platforms that have some of the information and they resell it. And then once you have that table, you can see that it starts to be, it seems as though it's pretty simple to start inferring people's email addresses. For example, if you have someone's IP address and you're naive, and you have that email address in the table, you can say, well, this person is at this particular IP. My table says that this IP address belongs to johncairo@gmail.com. So that's John Cairo. That's what's going on in the background, essentially. That's all that's
Got it.
happening. And again, it's not just IP. There's a bunch of other stuff. But in short,
Yeah.
that's what's happening. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess the question I'm sure on the top of everyone's head here is around like legality around these things. And I think it's kind of it's interesting, like arc, I'd say, of like the legal conversation in marketing, where like I'd say like 2018, no one would have batted an eye if this was like out there, and like people, it was like more mainstream. Like I don't think anyone would have like questioned it. Or 2017, maybe like before, like those type of eras. And if you go earlier, everyone's like, let's definitely do everything.
Mhm.
I guess where does this sit on the kind of legal ruler here, just in today's market, of
Mhm.
where legal sits?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, so this is not legal advice, but generally speaking, you have to follow, at least in the States, you have to follow something called CAN spam. That's the thing that applies. And those CAN spam laws are pretty clear and not all that strict. Like you have to be representing yourself accurately. It can't be like an email from a company that you don't actually own where you're misrepresenting yourself. You can't do that. There's a couple other simple rules that apply, but if you follow those rules, and most of the companies that use these tools do, like they're trying to market their product that someone was on their site looking at, it's okay. And it's okay even if they're wrong. Like even if you send an email to a completely wrong address that was never on your website, there's not necessarily anything like illegal about that. You can do that, but then you will pay the consequence of maybe being marked as spam, or maybe you get an unsubscribe, or it damages your deliverability. Like that's all there. But as far as I know, and I think this is pretty solid advice, like there's nothing illegal about doing this as long as you're not being a pest. When it comes to SMS, it's a little different, and like we all know, sending text messages, the rules are a lot stricter. But most of these companies that do this type of work don't spam SMS numbers. Otherwise, they probably get sued.
Got it.
Yeah.
The way that I've loosely explained this, just like I don't know if this is right, and maybe you can say this is a wildly wrong way to explain it, JJ, is kind of equated to like the classic like direct mail idea. Like you buy a list and then you send a million email or a million like physical pieces of mail to people. Is that kind of like similar, I guess, way of like more obviously analog here of like, hey, I'm gonna buy a list of like, I don't know, females in the metropolitan like Seattle area who have a household that own a house, right? Like that's my audience. Someone will sell it to me. I then send a bulk email to those people. Some of those might be wildly wrong. Like it could be off the like not that person. Is
Mhm.
that like a good way to like kind of equate it to like, or is
I
that
think so. Yeah, I think so. Except that you just have this like more primary expression of interest in your product than you would have on a bulk list, right? Like in theory, the people you're emailing have visited your website, and that's a strong indication that they might be interested in your product, rather than spamming a list of homeowners in Seattle or something like that. Like
yeah,
there's more precision in theory than what you're saying, but I agree with you. It's like one
yeah,
step further down that road. Yeah.
got it. Love it. Okay. Cool. I want to hear more about like what you either found or what you're kind of diving into when you're researching these different types of tools or different types of like processes.
hmm Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, when I first heard about these things, I was like super fascinated by this idea that you could identify people anonymously. And I mean, again, to circle back to how powerful this is, this really, I mean, this touches everything. If you are trying to figure out if your Facebook ads work and you have this dynamic where people are oftentimes clicking on ads on their phone and then they make a purchase on their desktop, if you can identify someone on the desktop, then you can connect the dots and say that this ad caused this particular purchase, right? And that's like incredibly powerful. It may change the complexion of all your marketing completely. So I just want to keep on reiterating how important this could be. But when I started researching them and I ran a whole bunch of tests, and what I did was like, you think about this and you think, well, how would you actually test this? How do you know if the emails are right or not? Right. This is kind of a complicated question. And the conclusion I came to, and it's a simple one, is I was like, well, if somebody identifies themselves to the site on their own, like they submit their email in a form or they make a purchase, we would hope that that email address is like 98% accurate, right? Or maybe more, hopefully 100%. Maybe there's some misspellings and stuff every once in a while. So the idea was simple. I was like, okay, I'm going to compare what these service providers say the person's email address is to what they actually, what they self-identified the email address to be. So I'm on the site, I buy a pair of Nikes, I put my email address in. What does one of these vendors say my email address is? Because I have a golden record of what it is. So that was the initial test that I ran, and I'm actually kind of curious what you think. Like, if you were being sold a product like this, what would your guess be? What would you, if someone's making you this promise, what's like an acceptable margin of error here for you?
Yeah, like so I'll say like we use one on our site, right? And so I have like an idea of expectation. Like I think we have a free plan right now, and like we were on the paid plan, and so I'm like the investment right now is very nominal. I'm not like, oh my goodness, we're jumping thousands of dollars into this.
Yeah.
But that being said, like I would expect a 10 to 20% off, right? Of like, hey, this is not correct.
Yeah.
And I would also expect if I was ever to flag that, is that like to be like refunded, right? From like
Mhm.
whatever company that would be. Is like, hey, I'm expecting that like if I'm buying credits or like number of de-anonymizations or however I'm billed, is I'm only billed for the accurate ones that are proven to be accurate.
Mhm.
And so I think that's like my assumption would be that 10 to 20% off, and those 10 to 20% and maybe like half of that is like refunded because it's realized this is not right. That,
Yeah.
that that would be a perception that I would guess like the marketplace would have.
And that's actually what I would expect too. Like 10% would be nice if they're 10% of the time and giving incorrect emails. That's, I think, totally acceptable. I think 20% is starting to push it, but it's like, okay, this may still be very useful as long as we plan and use the tool in a way that compensates for the fact that maybe 1 out of 5 email addresses is incorrect, right? Like, it starts to change how you're going to use the tool as you know how inaccurate it is. So I'm with you. Like, I thought that that's probably what I would find. I also thought I would probably find some vendors that were like 95% accurate. Like, best of breed would be like really, really close to almost always accurate. But that is not what I found. And what I found is pretty shocking. And I have a chart. I don't know if you want to share that, or yeah, let's look at this chart. So there's some simplifications made here, but the way I would look at this is just think it as like green is good and red is bad. Okay. And hopefully that already starts to tell a pretty scary story about what this data looks like. So these are a whole bunch of different vendors in the space. We're not going to call anybody out by name. Don't need to do that. But these are like the big vendors. You've probably heard about these guys. And what this is showing is exactly what I just described to you. So it's what percentage of the emails that they provide match the user provided email. So I buy something, I supply my email address, and then I just check, does the email address that was supplied by the customer, that's almost certainly accurate, match what these companies say it was? And like you said, you're expecting like 80% right. Well, the best one we found was about 10% right, which is, I mean, this is like like shocking, right? Like this is insane. If they were out there telling you that they were 10% accurate, you would it would be very unlikely, I think, that most companies would actually go and use these tools to market.
I'm just kind of curious. I'm sure people are thinking this as well. Is like, what sort of volume did you test this on? Like, when you see number per, like, was it like 100, 1,000, a million? How many records are you looking at?
In the tens of thousands for each
Okay.
vendor. Yeah, upwards of, some of them we were in like the high tens of thousands.
And was it like a particular vertical, I guess, like on like e-commerce versus like B2B software versus I don't know, info scam products?
Yeah. So I want to make sure that the B2B tool is somewhat separate from the D2C stuff, because the B2B tools, I still think, may, even if they're super inaccurate, they may have a use case. But this is all D2C. And I
Okay.
think you hit on an important point, which is the accuracy does vary depending on the demographic. So I mean, I can give you like maximum accuracies that I've seen from other vendors, and 10% is kind of like the average ish for the decent ones. I have seen them be accurate up to like 15 to 20%,
Got
but
it.
that's not what I see in my, like, in typical testing. And I also want to say that like this is not a single test. These tests have been run over a long period of time in many different ways. In some of these cases, I ran the test. In other cases, like other engineers from the company that I work at ran the test. So there's like a wide variety of testing. And on top of that, and I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but I brought these results back to these companies to show them what I was seeing. And um the my take on their response was that they were not testing the data on their own. So in many cases, it almost felt like this was the first time that they'd ever seen this data, which was pretty shocking, right? Like, how do you not have a truth set that you're running against constantly to see if the change you made yesterday in your code totally blew up the system? Right? So, I encourage everyone, part of just joining you today is like, I really, really encourage people to do these tests on their own. You don't have to listen to me here. Like that's not the idea. If you have an engineer, or even if you're somewhat technically capable, during the sales process, or if you're a client, go to these vendors and tell your vendor you want to test the accuracy against a golden record, and you need their help to do so. Like, seems like a very, very reasonable request. So if they get skittish about that, that's already a kind of a bad sign.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like on like taking this as what it is, right? So say for example, I like see an ad for one of these tools that do these things and I grab it and I'm like, whatever, awesome, for $79 a month, I'm gonna have 10,000 more people to email, right?
Mhm, mhm,
Um, what are the like the implications of like having it wrong? Like if like I think that's like the next step, right? Like say it is wrong, it's like, hey, there's no downside to being wrong, or like, is there a downside to being wrong?
mhm,
Potentially, right? Again, however people are using these, like you probably know better than most of like how are they actually being actioned.
mhm,
What are the potential like negatives there?
mhm. Well, let's break it up between B2B and D2C, because I think for B2B, it's less problematic, even if you only get like 5% right, because it feels like to me, most of the time with B2B, it's not, there's some human in the loop somewhere, at least from what I've seen. So, like, let me give you an example. Let's say that you get a visitor from a company that you're really interested in working with. It's very unlikely that that's incorrect, right? Like that would be weird, some crazy anomaly that it's not actually that person. So when you're going through them by hand and the volume is low, like it typically is from what I've seen with B2B, I think that there's still a world where it makes sense. Like you just have to realize that maybe you should only reach out to people who seem like it makes sense. Like we use our own tool. We dog food our own tool on our website, and something happened with a partner the other day where a partner came. I was trying to connect with them and I was sending the messages they visited. It's like, okay, this person's interested. This is an obvious way to use the data and it's not too risky for me to send that email. But the risk comes when it's a D2C brand and they're dumping huge amounts of incorrect contacts into their Klaviyo. From what I've seen over the last few years working in this industry, well-run ecom brand is getting, at least according to Klaviyo's attribution, like 50% of their revenue from their emails. So this is not something to be taken lightly and messed with. And when you start, do you want to take the chart off the screen?
Yeah.
When you start sending emails to people who have never been on your site and have no interest, and they start marking you as spam, it starts to hurt your deliverability. And like deliverability seems to be this weird, like benign word that it just never really seems to have the impact it should. But when your deliverability starts going down in Klaviyo, it literally means like maybe only 50% of people are receiving the emails you're sending. Like this is horrible, right? This is a huge problem. You don't want to interfere with a channel that's so important to your revenue. And that's the risk. Like that's the biggest risk, is you're really screwing up your deliverability in Klaviyo and changing the trajectory of the whole business because you have all these crappy contacts in your system.
Yeah. I guess we had a client a while back. Like here's a from the ground story. E-commerce approaching 100 million, like in top line annual revenue, like just for a sake of like volume representation. About 60% online, 40% direct mail, like just kind of in general.
Okay.
They were like, let's try one of these tools. Like they're doing significant ad budget, significant kind of push, significant, like they have the volume to kind of really make it work. And they were so nervous about like doing this and like integrating to Klaviyo. I think that they ended up just going and creating a new Klaviyo account that was just this tool. Because they're like, we don't want to like screw up our entire, like throw the baby out with the bathwater situation. Let's go get another bath and a new baby to try it out over there. Is that like what you'd, I guess, generally recommend then? Like seeing that majority that are wrong, like what's the play? It seems like there's a high risk to being wrong. And if I was a brand who's not super technical, and not every brand has a developer on staff that like even understands like what we're talking about, like, okay, that's what we're talking about. Like understands like how would you test it? How would you like roll this out like slowly? Like, would you just say broadly speaking, then like if you're a brand, if you're going to want to try to use any tool, regardless of which tool it is, like just set up a different email account? Like, I don't know. How do you weigh the pros and cons in doing this?
Yeah, so our tool has this ability to like we basically have a little ESP built into the tool, and you can just spin up a new IP and start sending emails from a brand new domain that won't impact your existing sending domain. I mean, there's some problems with that though, because typically this is relatively high volume. Like I can't imagine on $100 million website, you're probably bringing in like thousands of new contacts a day, and you need to warm up the email address to actually get that thing to deliver, right? So you may only be able to send a couple hundred emails a day unless you get crazy and start building multiple email addresses and IPs. And then the real problem is like if they're 90% accurate, you're not going to get very far because you're going to start getting marked as spam on your brand new email address too. So
Yeah.
like sure, it's safe, it's safer, I agree, you can protect the deliverability of the existing domain, but like where are you headed exactly? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think that's the worry that I think most people have, right? Like the way that we started this conversation is like the opportunity is grand and open.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
But then I think when it comes to like the actual execution, is that what's where a lot of people run into these problems that like they might I think are symptoms of what you're explaining, right? If you had 100% accuracy 100% of the time,
Mhm.
like that's not a problem, or like it is a
Mhm.
problem but not a very big one because you're emailing the right person, the right point in time, the right offer, the right thing, the right widget, and you're like, hey, just thought of you today, wanted to send you 50% off your first order. Like everyone, like if you send that as your like a right offer, right time, right person, right place, right thing, like you shouldn't be marked as spam or like a very low amount. um
Mhm.
and so like I don't know how do you like handle that of like the potential negatives of these things being so wrong, like in that case scenario.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's like this weird dynamic where even though you would think that even if you're correct, like let's say you're 100% correct and you're sending emails at the right time to the right person, there's still this tendency for people to, maybe this isn't surprising, but there's still a tendency for you to get marked as spam if they haven't signed up. Like our tool, the I don't want to spend too much time focusing on what we do, but we do this process in a very different way, and we're much more accurate. We're more like the numbers that you gave originally, like the 10 to 20% wrong. And even using our tool, even when you use third party contacts, the spam reports are still quite like they're not out of control, but they're elevated. And so it depends on the brand and depends on their tolerance and like how much gas they're going to get out of working with the tool like we have. But even in there's definitely cases where it doesn't fit, like the third party data, this anonymized, it's de-anonymized data doesn't work even when it's right. And I think it's the highly dependent on the demographic of the website. Like you have some people who, just don't want to be emailed and they get mad the first time they get an email that they didn't sign up for and they know they didn't sign up for it. So I think I lost the thread of your question a little bit, but I think you're kind of going to the like, what do you do with this data, right? Like what's the use if it's so bad? And is that where
Yeah,
you
I
want me
think
kind of
like
going?
yeah, like in my mind, right? And I think this is not to like deviate too much, but I feel like there's this bifurcation in the market as a whole. Uh Not just in this market, in every market right now with the good old AI of things that are like done for you, like plug and play, versus like here are all the building blocks to build whatever your heart desires, right?
Mhm,
Like
mhm,
here, give us $20 a month, and I'll give an example of like if I was running an email or whatever, like a de-anonymization thing is like, hey, give us $200 a month. You pay $1 per successfully delivered email, and we will
mhm,
just deliver the email on your behalf. Like, don't even talk about Klaviyo. Don't talk about anything. When they hit reply, or if they buy, if like we know that this person does buy, they then go into your like Klaviyo or whatever, like other your main list, right?
mhm.
Which is like one way that you could sell something like this, right? It's like, hey, just
Sure.
give us money. Whole email integration, and all we do is this thing, right? And it's all in one. On the other
Mhm,
side is like, hey, we are a tool that we provide you a webhook whenever we get the thing with the email, and you do what you want to do with this information. It's on you. You figure it out. What flows, what automations, what systems.
mhm,
Um, and I feel like that's where people are like kind of I feel like struggle is which one are we going down, and which type of person is buying that, right? Am I buying the little one-off thing? I know how to use it, or do I not
mhm,
know how to use it? And I want to buy the outcome of like you send emails for me, and like I pay you like per email sent, and I can customize the email or the offer or the thing or. And I don't know. I feel like that's like what's happening more often is like this bifurcation in that type of product that's
mhm,
being sold, and people don't know what to do, right? Like you here's this tool, I have a login, awesome. Now what?
mhm. Yeah, well, I mean, in the case of almost all these tools, it is relatively clear what to do with it. Like they'll pipe the data into Klaviyo, suggest that you build backup flows, kind of like Elevar would, if you're familiar with what they do in Klaviyo. Um, but some of the tools have a way to like webhook out the contacts to, I mean, our tool does. It makes it easy to set up, and you can also webhook the contacts out if you want to put them into, I don't know, a different system. But I mean, I agree with you. I can think many different little industries, little like sub industries in our industry have that bifurcation. Like it's like blot out and Elevar. This is a good comparison. Like Elevar is kind of the done for you. You will just take care of it and do everything for you, and then blot out similar promises, but it's like more engineering focused. And yeah, I mean, you can do more with it because of that. I don't really know what the answer is there. I think it's
Yeah.
like I think it's really, in my opinion, it's incumbent on the tool provider to figure out how to make money from the tool in like 95% of cases. I really believe that. Like, I don't think people in the industry have time to take a raw data set and like, even no matter what that data set has, it could be incredible. They very rarely will be able to take it and like run with it and make money out of it. And that's the whole point of these SaaS businesses, is like we have the knowledge to do some of that. We can think hard about it and put together tech that actually, builds on it. But I think, to be perfectly honest, I think this industry, this visitor ID industry, applying it to emails, like, first of all, it's not the best application unless you're more accurate. Like, I think once you're at 80% or so, yes, it makes sense to send emails, and you can kind of mitigate the spam complaints by taking a whole bunch of other tactics that, if anyone's interested, I can talk to online. But I think there's a whole bunch of other use cases for this data too. And one of them is, and what we haven't really covered, is there's this interplay with third party data and first party data. And there's a way to use third party data. And I know I'm using a little bit of lingo, but when I talk third party data, I'm talking about like buying data from data sources or generating data from other web. Like, there's a whole bunch of ways to get this data that's not self submitted. There is a way to kind of like intermingle these two sets of data and not email anybody who's never identified themselves to you, but use it to recognize them. So, like that whole cross device thing I described earlier, where someone's on their phone and then moves to the desktop, you may be able to use other data sources to re-identify that person on their desktop device. And that's really where we are starting to go. And it's not like, we call that resignal, and our signal is extremely strong. It's like, through, actually, if you want to look at that chart again, do you want to share that really quickly again? Using some of that third party data, we're able to do some pretty incredible things. Like, this blue line at the bottom, or this like light blue line, is Klaviyo's extended ID, which is their first party signal. And then on top of that is our signal, which is like an amped up version of the first party signal, where we use some third party data. And you can see how much more. So these are product view events. You can see how much more product view data we get. So there's a lot more you can do with this than just send emails. Like, sure, you can send a whole bunch of extra browse abandonment emails. People viewed the product and they left, and you can remind them to come back. But what's potentially more interesting is like profiling, behavioral profiling. So understanding that some of these people are interested, but you don't even know it because you can't see their behavior. And then what do you do with that information? Like, maybe you remarket to them. Maybe your remarketing audiences get way smarter because you know who's actually active on your site and who's not. Or maybe you build custom segments to email that change really rapidly, taking this information into account. And like, the use cases go on and on and on. The more information you have about their behavior, the more likely you can predict what they're going to do next. So this is a long and a tangented way to answer your question, but I think like the use cases are the problem mostly, as long as you have relatively accurate data.
Yeah, it's super
Yeah.
interesting. Like, um, Yeah, it's always one of those things where is it like a feature or like a company type of thing of like it seems like what like Klaviyo should just do this, right? Like in the back of
Mhm.
your head, like and those are the things where I'm like, oh, it'd be very interesting to see like how the market progresses. Because at the end of the day, everyone's trying to like get the better like the best possible data to like Meta, to Google, to whatever else it might be from a
Yes.
remarketing standpoint as well as a conversion standpoint, right? And I'm sure
Yes.
like I've spoken to a couple of Meta like engineers, like they're trying to do that as well, right? Like that's like they're also trying to do this, but not telling you like all like, hey, here's how we're doing it or why we're doing it this way. So yeah, it'll be
Mhm.
very interesting to see how this either like everything converges with this visitor ID like resolution stuff or like diverges of like these tools taking off and going into like more application like integrated routes, right? Of like, hey, we are an email sender and like we have a feature that we can just do this. Like we don't even tell you that like how it works or anything about it. Like we have a custom list in our like not Klaviyo, like a competitor or whatever, like better than email.com. And like we just have like a list that like does this, so it just constantly is building for you. Like I can think of so many applications that are just integrated into products,
Mhm.
whether that's Meta or whether that's an email provider that do things like this. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm like really intrigued to see what happens.
Yeah, so am I. I think like there's always going to be that. Well, why don't they just do it themselves? And I think it's actually, if you ever work with these companies, like I worked really closely with some of the Meta team on when I was at Elevar, and like they have pretty strict. First of all, they don't use third party data. Like they won't use it. So anytime you're doing something that's just like a little bit outside the norm, typically they can't take that data into consideration. And then on top of that, like there is kind of a philosophy where how hard is this to implement for a customer? You know, like is this a one click thing or is this really really complicated and the customers are never going to do it? You've probably seen, have you seen like the Cappy Gateway and then the new version of Cappy Gateway, right? Like they're trying, but when it actually hits the market, most people just don't have the technical skills to actually implement it, and it's confusing and there's like no place to go to find help. And so I think this dynamic will exist forever where there's like a little bit of a cat and mouse game. You know, Klaviyo did it with what they call extended ID, but we are now like way past where they were with that. So as long as
Yeah,
you're able to stay ahead by a couple years, you have a serious like value prop that you can offer people.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, super interesting. I guess any final thoughts here about like or things you want to share about anything at all that we did not talk about?
Yeah, I just think that like whether you're in the market for one of these tools or you have one installed on your website, you should really take a good hard look at what's happening, particularly in the D2C case, what's happening with your deliverability in Klaviyo. And you should also have a look at like the spam complaints coming from these tools. And if you have the capabilities, you should run a test to see whether the what the accuracy looks like and what kind of contacts you're dumping into Klaviyo. Because one of the externalities that we didn't talk about is I see some of these Klaviyo accounts that have had tools like this installed on them for 2 years, and half of the contacts in the account are bad contacts. Like even if they were 50% accurate, which they're not, a quarter of the contacts in the Klaviyo instance or whatever ESP they're using are incorrect. And that means that they're paying, their bill has gone up. Like this is like a real, forget about deliverability for a second, although it's extremely important. The Klaviyo bill may have climbed by like $5,000 a month and continue to climb. And it's like
Hmm.
they forgot the tools installed, or they forgot, like they're just not thinking about it. And I mean, these are serious consequences. So I would just say to anyone using one of these tools or considering, just be really careful. Like you're kind of you're playing with fire here. And sure, like JJ mentioned, there's ways to potentially work around it. I don't think they work very well, but there are ways to protect yourself. But just like your email address, your email account is probably like your most value. It may be debatable, but it's probably more valuable than your other marketing channels. be careful with it, and now
Yeah.
that you know this information, like, check to see if what I'm saying is right. You don't have to take it at face value, but check and keep your email accounts healthy, and like use tools that can prove to you that they're actually accurate.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
yeah, super interesting. And I think a really useful thing is like just keep checking to make sure it's right and know how.
Mhm.
And I think that's like I think that problem is gonna be the ongoing debate. Like again, you just the simple example of like conversion tracking, right? Like how do you know it's right? And we've all seen the like really big brand that's not tracking purchases correctly or like add to carts or any of these
Mhm.
things. And you're like, how do they do this? Well, no one knew how to check it, right? No one knew to check it or where you should check it or how to do that. And I think that's like it's really helpful that like someone like yourself is like saying, hey, make sure you do these things and
Mhm.
then here's a couple of like ways to think about it. So,
Yeah, and if
but
it
yeah,
just last thing, if all this feels extremely intimidating and you're just like, "Oh, well, how am I gonna have this conversation, or who am I gonna talk to do this?" Go to the provider and ask them to help you, one, determine what the spam complaints have been. Like, show me what the spam complaints on your tool have been. Show me how many new contacts you've added to the site. And I think you can even go as far as saying, "Can you help me run an accuracy test?" Like, these are things that we would do we would love to do these things. We would do these things in a heartbeat. So if your provider is, you know, unsure or gives you blowback on any of these asks, it's like, this is a bad sign, right? This is a bad sign. So put it on them, put it on the vendor.
awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Well, it's been great chatting. If anyone wants to reach out, where should they go?
Yeah, they can just, I think LinkedIn's probably the easiest thing. Send me a message on LinkedIn if you have any questions on this. And as you can tell, I love to chat about this stuff. And I just want the market to be educated, because there's a lot of friends in this business who I've seen using these tools, and I don't love what I'm seeing it do to their businesses. So that's it. Yeah. Message me on LinkedIn if you want to
Aw-
chat.
Awesome. We'll link that if you're watching this in the replay. Otherwise, John, it's been great chatting, and I hope to see you soon.
Yeah. Right back at you, JJ. Thanks for having me.